tell you something. Joe Biden is a criminal, and he's been a criminal for a long time, and you're a criminal in the media for not reporting it. Good luck, everybody. Have a good time. Have a good time.
I literally clapped my hands when he said that because I've been waiting a long time for him to get past the fake news label and cast them for what they really are. Criminals. Because not only do they cover up serious crimes, they make false criminal claims against those they dislike, they manipulate and deceive the innocent, they ignore vital facts and piss all over context, and they slander, intimidate, and seek to destroy those that do pursue the truth. And they keep getting away with it, and getting away with it, and getting away with it.
So he will not go gently into that good political night. It is a Trumpian rage against the dying of the light. Look, the United States is facing an historic challenge. Will a sitting president accept the results of an election and concede power or not? What if Donald Trump does not? Has his allegations of electoral fraud, without evidence, we should say, damaged the U.S. system?
Without evidence? Whoa, that's priceless. Maybe in the kaleidoscope of your twisted little minds and within the walls of your flashy studios, but only because you purposely choose not to show the evidence or speak to anyone that has voiced eyewitness testimony concerning these serious criminal matters. There's a host of cheating going on, and there appears to be lots of evidence for all of it. I have to say, I'm really growing to hate this time of year because I have to listen to snakes like this spit their venomous lies while they're wearing a poppy. If you're going to ooze out of the cracks and spew toxic lies about what's going on and participate in the hijacking of our country and the destruction of the values that people have fought to preserve, then I'd rather you didn't decorate yourself with something that signifies something that you're the polar opposite of. You media freaks are so entrenched in the big lie that you have to just keep doubling down on your bullshit. I still forever wonder how you people sleep at night when you're basically sleeping in your own shit. It's sick. Creatures like you must have a really tortured and tormented conscience, knowing you've contributed absolutely nothing to humanity but a daily dose of wicked lies that grease the gears of the war crime machinery that incredibly creepy people are pulling the levers of. The big one-eyed monster madmen that own your mind and represent nothing but a decayed black heart. These are certainly the blackest, grimmest times I've ever seen. And although I'm pretty resourceful with words, I have to admit I'm running out of ways to describe all these monsters. Especially now, seeing them all feasting on an election victory that doesn't exist. Talk about selling the farm. The one thing that is predictable with these monsters is their continual eagerness to prove that they are monsters. And it's more than ironic seeing them wearing their monkey-see, monkey-do dunce mask muzzles in their profile picture, because it only enhances the reality that their thoughts and words aren't really their own. Unprecedented times in history.
We keep hearing these monsters say.
Unprecedented. If there ever was an exchange of statements made that will be catalogued as historically significant and reflected upon with grave gravity many years in the future, it will be this.
You know, I've said it often. The cure cannot be worse than the problem itself.
Precisely. Centuries from now, they'll still be saying,
remember what happened when they didn't listen to that orange guy?
I want to open the schools. We have to open our country. We're not going to have a country. You can't do this. We can't keep this country closed. This is a massive country with a massive economy. People are losing their jobs. They're committing suicide. There's depression, alcohol, drugs at a level that nobody's ever seen before. There's abuse, tremendous abuse. We have to open our country. You know, I've said it often. The cure cannot be worse than the problem itself. And that's what's happening. And he wants to close down. He'll close down the country if one person in our massive bureaucracy says we should close it down.
Vice President Biden, your response.
Simply not true. We ought to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Walk and chew gum at the same time. Got that? Fucking brilliant.
I missed that memo for sure.
That exchange recorded in history will show the stark contrast between who was coherent and taking things seriously in the year of 2020 and who wasn't. And above all, who wasn't and isn't responsible for the catastrophic disaster that the year of 2020 is going down in history as. Apart from the overall disgrace that Joe Biden was even running for president, I think it's a political spectacle sideshow that Sleepy Joe claims the reason he ran for president was because Trump said,
there are very fine people on both sides at Charlottesville and blah blah blah.
Biden has made that claim various times, and that asshole Chris Wallace even ratified it in the debate. And it's kind of funny because you can even hear Trump in the background sarcastically saying, "Oh yeah, sure."
The issue of race. Vice President Biden, you say that President Trump's response to the violence in Charlottesville 3 years ago, when he talked about very fine people on both sides, was what directly led you to launch this run for president.
Oh, yeah, sure.
President Trump, you have often said that you believe you have done more for black Americans than any president, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. My question for the two of you is, why should voters trust you rather than your opponent to deal with the race issues facing this country over the next 4 years? Vice President Biden, you go first.
It's about equity and equality. It's about decency. It's about the Constitution. And we have never walked away from trying to require equity for everyone, equality for the whole of America. But we've never accomplished it. But we've never walked away from it like he has done. It is true. The reason I got in the race is when those people, close your eyes, remember what those people looked like coming out of the fields carrying torches, their veins bulging, just spewing anti-Semitic bile, and accompanied by the Ku Klux Klan. A young woman got killed. And they asked the president what he thought. He said there were very fine people on both sides. No president has ever said anything like that.
It is his
now,
2
second,
minutes, sir.
Now, what I find so repulsive about this is how they've intentionally rehashed it so many times and narrowed it down so that all they need to do is say the words, "there were very fine people." And they know all the zealots dial that in and decipher it as,
The Orange Man Bad is a Nazi fascist that thinks the KKK are very fine people, and he snatches babies from the arms of mothers and puts them in cages.
it's all so kooky. And in this further example, Biden even begins his little performance by saying, quote, and then he blends it in with the animated talk about bulging veins and tiki torches.
You might remember, it matters. You've heard me say it before, words matter. And the words of a president particularly matter. When the president tweeted, "Liberate Michigan," liberate Michigan, that's the call that was heard. That was the dog whistle. Just like when he said there were, quote, "very fine people on both sides in Charlottesville." Father, as they came out of the fields carrying torches, their veins just bulging, shouting anti-Semitic bile, carrying Nazi flags, accompanied by the Ku Klux Klan. And when a young woman was killed protesting, the president was asked, what did he think? And he said something no president has ever heard. There were very fine people on both sides.
So we see that by saying quote first, he gets to sort of include all the bulging veins and Nazi flags and KKK as part of the quote. Except he's not quoting fuck all. And for someone to be saying they're running their election campaign on such utter nonsense shows you the emptiness of it all. It's all so shallow and even childish. If that's the only strategy you have to tear down your opponent, then your opponent obviously isn't the brigand you're trying to make him out to be. All told, Biden's mission statement, shall we say, is based on a lie. And again, not just another lie, but another seriously embellished lie that's so easily proven wrong. Many of you have likely seen some of the small clips that have appeared on the internet that were taken from the infamous Very Fine People press conference that clearly shows what Trump was talking about. I have a full version of that press conference, and before I play those key parts at length for the record, I want to play an excerpt from the beginning part that pertained to what the press conference was supposed to be about in the first place: infrastructure. But none of the media vultures gave a damn about infrastructure because they turned it into a press conference about white supremacy and Nazis. And I'm raising this issue because I find it interesting how they managed to take the very same press conference where Trump is showing actual progress that he's made as president and use it to badger him with questions about white supremacy so they can then change all his words around and make up nagging lies that he thinks white supremacists are very fine people. And no president has ever said that, and he's never accomplished anything because he's a racist and blah, blah, blah. So here we have Trump using a chart to help make his point in classic Trump fashion.
We've just had a great set of briefings upstairs on our infrastructure agenda. My administration is working every day to deliver the world-class infrastructure that our people deserve and, frankly, that our country deserves. That's why I just signed a new executive order to dramatically reform the nation's badly broken infrastructure permitting process. Just blocks away is the Empire State Building. It took 11 months to build the Empire State Building. But today, it can take as long as a decade and much more than that. Many stores where it takes 20 and 25 years just to get approvals to start construction of a fairly routine highway. Highway builders must get up to 16 different approvals involving 9 different federal agencies governed by 29 different statutes. One agency alone can stall a project for many years and even decades. Not only does this cost our economy billions of dollars, but it also denies our citizens the safe and modern infrastructure they deserve. This over-regulated permitting process is a massive, self-inflicted wound on our country. It's disgraceful. Denying our people much-needed investments in their community. And I just want to show you this because it was just shown me, and I think I'm going to show it to the media. Both real and fake media, by the way. This is what it takes to get something approved today. Elaine, you see that? So this is what it takes. Permitting process flowchart. That's a flowchart. So that can go out to 20 years. This shows about 10. But that could go out to about 20 years to get something approved. This is for a highway. I've seen a highway recently in a certain state. I won't mention its name. It's 17 years. I could have built it for $4 or $5 million without the permitting process. It cost hundreds of millions of dollars, but it took 17 years to get it approved, and many pages of environmental impact studies. This is what we will bring it down to. This is less than 2 years. This is going to happen quickly. That's what I'm signing today. This will be less than 2 years for a highway. So it's going to be quick. It's going to be a very streamlined process. And by the way, if it doesn't meet environmental safeguards, we're not going to approve it. Very simple. We're not going to approve it. So this is this. Maybe this one will say, let's throw the other one away. Would anybody like it from the media? Would anybody like that long, beautiful chart? You can have it.
That whole idea of taking an axe to many of the foolish permit restrictions is one of the many reasons why many people, particularly the business people, voted for Trump. Being a builder himself, he knows the hoops people have to leap through when it comes to unnecessary red tape. Because it's not just roads. But as I noted, none of the infrastructure and economic stimulation stuff mattered to the media vultures because all they cared about was making sure they can allege he's a white supremacist. So now let's hear all the key parts where he makes it all perfectly clear more than once about the very fine people. And one thing you can't help but notice is how often he has to put his hand up and say, "Excuse me," to stop them from interrupting. That's why they always get everything he says wrong, because they don't listen to a word he says in the first place.
Let me ask you, Mr. President, why did you wait so long to last neo-Nazi?
I didn't wait long. Why? I didn't wait long. I didn't wait long. I wanted to make sure, unlike most politicians, that what I said was correct, not make a quick statement. The statement I made on Saturday, the first statement, was a fine statement. But you don't make statements that direct unless you know the fact. It takes a little while to get the facts. You still don't know the facts. And it's a very important process to me. And it's a very important statement. So I don't want to go quickly and just make a statement for the sake of making a political statement. I want to know the facts. If you go back to in fact, I brought it.
Who did you bring, Mr. President?
As I said on, remember this, Saturday, we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. And then I went on from there. Now, here's the thing. Excuse me. Take it nice and easy. Here's the thing. When I make a statement, I like to be correct. I want the facts. This event just happened. In fact, a lot of the event didn't even happen yet as we were speaking. This event just happened. Before I make a statement, I need the facts. So I don't want to rush into a statement. So making the statement when I made it was excellent. In fact, the young woman, who I hear is a fantastic young woman, and it was on NBC, her mother wrote me and said, through, I guess, Twitter, social media, the nicest things, and I very much appreciated that. I hear she was a fine, really actually an incredible young woman, but her mother on Twitter thanked me for what I said. And honestly, if the press were not fake, and if it was honest, the press would have said what I said was very nice. But unlike you and unlike you and unlike the media, before I make a statement, I like to know the facts. They don't. They don't. They don't.
McCain said that the alt-right is behind these attacks, and he linked that same group to those who perpetrated the attack in Charlottesville.
Well, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm sure Senator McCain must know what he's talking about. But when you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
define it for me. Come on, let's go. Define
Senator
it for me.
McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at him? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
This is Senator McCain's statement.
Let me ask you this. What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. I'm not finished, fake news. That was a horrible day.
The same level as
I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent. Go ahead.
Do you think that what you call the alt-left is the same as neo-Nazis?
Those people, all of those people, excuse me, I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue, Robert E. Lee. So, excuse me, and you take a look at some of the groups and you see, and you know it if you were honest reporters, which in many cases you're not, but many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So, this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop? But they were there to protest, excuse me, you take a look the night before, they were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. Infrastructure question, go ahead.
Should statues of Robert E. Lee stay up?
I would say that's up to a local town, community, or the federal government, depending on where it is located.
Are you against the Confederacy? How concerned are you about race relations in America? And do you think things have gotten worse or better since you took office?
I think they've gotten better or the same. Look, they've been frayed for a long time. And you can ask President Obama about that because he'd make speeches about it. But I believe that the fact that I've brought in, it will be soon, millions of jobs. You see where companies are moving back into our country. I think that's going to have a tremendous positive impact on race relations. We have companies coming back into our country. We have 2 car companies that just announced. We have Foxconn in Wisconsin just announced. We have many companies, I say, pouring back into the country. I think that's going to have a huge positive impact on race relations. You know why? It's jobs. What people want now, they want jobs. They want great jobs with good pay. And when they have that, you watch how race relations will be. And I'll tell you, we're spending a lot of money on the inner cities. We're fixing the inner cities. We're doing far more than anybody's done with respect to the inner cities. It's a priority for me, and it's very important.
Mr. President, are you putting what you're calling the alt-left and white supremacists on the same moral plane?
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
On both sides, sir? You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't put themselves down as neo, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him?
I do love
Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
The press is treated unfairly, sir. I'm sorry, I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly?
No.
I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day it looked like they had some rough, bad people, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this, there are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment.
Now, after all he said, and with how many times he repeated it, it takes a special kind of stupid to translate that into an endorsement of the KKK and a refusal to denounce white supremacy. And yet, unbelievably, that's what the entire Democratic campaign has evolved around. Another particularly gruesome encounter was in the White House press conference room, and that dickhead John Roberts was banging his head against the wall about it.
If I could start off, I'd like to ask you for a definitive and declarative statement without ambiguity or deflection. As the person who speaks for the president, does the president denounce white supremacism and groups that espouse it in all their forms?
This has been answered yesterday by the president himself, the day before by the president himself on the debate stage. The president was asked this. He said, sure, 3 times. Yesterday, he was point blank asked, do you denounce white supremacy? And he said, I've always denounced any form of that. I can go back and read for you in August 2019, in one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. In August of 2017, racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals. And thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups. I have an entire list of these quotes that I can go through with you. He has condemned white supremacy more than any president in modern history.
Just to clear it up this morning, can you, naming it, make a declarative statement that you denounce, that the president denounces it?
I just did. The president has denounced this repeatedly. The president was asked this. You're contriving a storyline and a narrative.
I'm just asking you to put this to rest.
I just did. I read you all of the quotes, and if you need to see them in writing, I will put them in an email. Paula.
So, Kayleigh, can you right now denounce white supremacy and the group that espoused it?
The president has denounced white supremacy, the KKK, and hate groups in all forms. He signed a resolution to that effect. The president just last week, perhaps you all weren't covering it, but just last week expressed his desire to see the KKK prosecuted as domestic terrorists. This president had advocated for the death penalty for a white supremacist, the first federal execution in 17 years. His record on this is unmistakable, and it's shameful that the media refuses to cover it.
Just to clear it up, he says. Can you believe he even said that? It's so deranged that they can sit there and be so ridiculous. These people must come from test tubes. Even the look on Kayleigh's face is to the effect of,
"Are you for real?"
A bunch of past quotes, he complains. Yeah, quite a few. But if he views them as so entirely worthless, then what's the point of making another statement for him, when it too will just get pigeonholed as another worthless quote from the past? Does Trump have to report to you every day and make a fucking proclamation that he condemns white supremacy, even though he's already done it about 57,000 times? But it's obviously not enough for you sleazeballs. And that's because you're not news people, and you're not journalists, and you're not reporters. You're criminals.
Did you see how he was such a good monkey and put his face diaper back on after he finished squirting out his verbal diarrhea? Good monkey.
It's a foregone conclusion that when you literally brainwash droves of people into thinking that a certain leader is comparable to, or worse than, Hitler, then said brainwashed people will justify lying and cheating as a means to defeat said leader.
And that's what's happening, because the cheating in this election is overwhelming, all the way from the top down to the average citizen. If the citizens are thoroughly brainwashed into thinking Trump is Hitler, and many of them are, then they think it's an emergency that warrants extreme measures, which means cheating in any way they can.
And besides using COVID as an excuse for the lack of support for Biden and Harris, the overreaching fear-mongering regulations were being used as a shroud to help them cheat. The problem with all that is, it's not supposed to work that way, and Trump is not a Nazi.
Come on, man.
Trump won that election bigly. The huge, enthusiastic crowds that followed his rallies everywhere he went, and all the other endless Trump train parades and boat parades, was clear evidence who was going to clean up. It's truly very sad to see the blatant heist they're trying to pull off here, and Canada's failure to be aggressively fighting on the side of a fair election is unsettling, to say the least. This traitorous prick has the nerve to use the word allies while the stench of deceit floats thick through the halls of the Canadian Parliament. It's a shameful dark shadow that has been cast across this land. Just when you thought the depth of melancholy had reached the bottom of the pit, the hole seems to cave in deeper and darker.